chest and the dirt floor. Behind her, 8-year-old Cal pressed himself against her spine, and the twins, Lila and Maisie, barely 6, clung to each other in the shadows, their faces smudged with ash and fear. "Don't come closer," Emily said again, forcing steel into her voice. The barn smelled of rot and mouse droppings. Wind whistled through gaps in the planking, carrying the scent of snow from the mountains. They'd been hiding here for 2 nights, burning scraps of wood so small the smoke barely rose, rationing the last of the hardtack she'd grabbed when they fled. The man in the doorway didn't move. He was tall, somewhere past 40, with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much. His coat was good wool, his boots solid leather. This was no drifter. A silver star gleamed faintly on his chest, but not a sheriff's star. Something else. "Wade Hollis," he said again, slower this time. "I own the Triple H Ranch, about 8 miles west. Your smoke's been visible for 2 days. If I could find you, so can Briggs." Emily's heart hammered. "I don't know any Briggs." "You know your father owed money." The words landed like a fist. Emily's throat tightened. "Pa's debts died with him." "Should have." Wade's voice was quiet, almost gentle. "But Silas Briggs doesn't see it that way. He holds the note on your land. $600 your father borrowed after your mother passed. The land's worth maybe $200, plowed out and dry. Briggs doesn't want the land." "Then what?" "He wants the children." The rifle dipped. Emily's vision swam. Behind her, Cal's breathing went ragged. "That's a lie," she whispered. Wade shook his head slowly. "Wish it was. There are places out in California, mining camps and worse, where they pay good money for young hands. No questions asked. Briggs has sold 3 other families' children in the past year. Sheriff won't touch him. Briggs owns half the county board." Emily's knees wanted to buckle. She'd known the danger was real, known it in her bones when she'd seen the men riding up to the homestead 4 days after Pa's funeral. She'd grab the children and run, moving at night, hiding in root cellars and under bridges. But hearing it spoken aloud made it solid, inescapable. "Why should I trust you?" she managed. Wade glanced past her, toward the children. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because I brought food. And because if I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't have knocked." He stepped back out of the doorway and gestured toward the yard. Emily edged forward, rifle still raised, and peered outside. A wagon sat in the twilight, piled with sacks of flour, salt pork, wool blankets. A lantern hung from the seat, casting steady light. "You're going to buy us," Emily said flatly. Wade's jaw tightened. "No, I'm going to get you somewhere safe before Briggs finds you. Then we're going to figure out how to end this." "Nobody fights Silas Briggs." "I do." The certainty in his voice was unnerving. Emily studied him, searching for the lie, the angle. Men didn't help for nothing. Pa had taught her that too. But Wade Hollis just stood there, hands loose at his sides, waiting. Cal spoke up, his voice small and cracked. "Emmy, I'm hungry." The twins whimpered in agreement. Emily closed her eyes. 6 days of running, 6 days of watching her siblings grow thinner, colder, more frightened. She was 19 years old, and she had no idea what to do. "If you're lying, then shoot me when you find out," Wade said simply. "But right now your brother needs food and those girls need warmth. Make your choice." Emily lowered the rifle an inch, then another. Her arms ached. Everything ached. "All right," she whispered. Wade nodded once, turned, and walked back to the wagon. Emily watched him move. No sudden gestures, no false smiles. He pulled a cloth-wrapped bundle from the wagon bed and set it on the ground, then stepped back again. "Bread and cheese," he said. "Still warm. I'll wait by the wagon while you feed them." Emily crept forward, snatched the bundle, and retreated into the barn. The moment she unwrapped it, the twins lunged. She tore the bread into pieces, made them chew slowly, forced herself to eat a bite even though her stomach had knotted into a fist. Cal ate mechanically, eyes never leaving the stranger outside. "Is he really going to help us?" he asked quietly. Emily didn't answer. She didn't know. When the food was gone, she stepped back outside. Wade was leaning against the wagon, scanning the horizon. The sun had dropped below the ridge, leaving the prairie soaked in purple shadow. "We need to move," he said. Briggs has men watching the roads. I know a way through the hills, but we have to go now. Where? My ranch. It's defensible. Stone house, good sight lines. Briggs won't try anything there. Not tonight. And tomorrow? Wade met her eyes. Tomorrow we figure out how to make sure he never tries anything again. Emily wanted to argue, to demand guarantees, but the cold was seeping through her threadbare coat and the twins were shivering. She looked back at the barn, at the pathetic little pile of ash where their fire had been, at the broken boards and empty darkness. All right, she said again. Wade climbed onto the wagon seat and offered a hand. Emily ignored it, boosting herself up beside him. Cal and the twins scrambled into the back, burrowing into the blankets like animals seeking dens. Wade flicked the reins and the horses moved, slow and steady, away from the barn and into the gathering night. They rode in silence for a long time. The wagon creaked. The stars came out hard and bright in the frozen sky. Emily kept the rifle across her lap, her finger near the trigger. Why? She asked finally. Wade didn't look at her. Why what? Why help us? You don't know us. This isn't your fight. His hands tightened on the reins. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, very quietly, I had a family once. Wife, 2 boys. Fever took them 8 years ago. I didn't save them. Maybe I can't save you either, but I'm damn well going to try. The rawness in his voice silenced her. Emily stared at the road ahead, at the dark hills rising against the stars, and said nothing more. They traveled for over an hour, cutting through gullies and narrow passes Emily had never seen. Wade clearly knew this country, every rock and turning. Finally, they crested a ridge and Emily saw lights below, a sprawling ranch house built of stone and timber, with barns and corrals spread out behind it. Smoke rose from the chimney, warm and welcoming. Triple H, Wade said, home. As they descended toward the house, Emily felt something unknot in her chest, not trust, not yet, but something close to hope. Then Wade went rigid beside her. Get down, he said sharply. Emily dropped flat on the wagon seat, heart racing. What? Riders, coming up from the south. She risked a glance. 5 shapes moved through the darkness, spread out in a line, blocking the road ahead. Wade pulled the wagon to a halt and set the brake. His hand moved to his coat, came out holding a revolver. Stay here, he said. No matter what happens, you stay with the children. Wade, but he was already climbing down, walking forward into the open space between the wagon and the riders. Emily shifted, rifle ready, watching. The riders stopped 20 yards out. One of them walked his horse forward, a thin man in an expensive coat, his face sharp and cruel in the moonlight. Wade Hollis, the man said, his voice smooth as oil. Didn't expect to see you playing nursemaid. Briggs, Wade's voice was flat, emotionless. You're on my land. Am I? Silas Briggs smiled. Funny, I thought I was collecting property. Those children are mine, Hollis. Their father signed a contract. A dead man's signature isn't worth the paper it's on. Judge Murphy disagrees. I have a legal claim. You have a piece of paper that says you can take the land. Nothing about the children. Briggs's smile widened. Creative interpretation. The law is flexible when you know the right people. Wade took another step forward. His gun was still holstered, but his hand hovered near it. You're not taking them. You gonna stop me? You and what army? Just me. The other riders shifted in their saddles. Emily could see guns on their hips, rifles in their scabbards. Wade was outnumbered 5-1. Briggs laughed, high and sharp. You always were stubborn, Hollis. But you're not stupid. Give me the children and I'll forget you interfered. Keep them and I'll come back with the law and take your ranch too. Try it. Briggs's smile vanished. You think you're untouchable because you have money? I own this county. I own the sheriff, the judge, half the merchants in town. You're one man. One man who knows where you buried Thomas Garrett. The silence was sudden and absolute. Briggs's face went pale, then flushed dark red. You're bluffing. Am I? Wade's voice was soft, deadly. Spring of 71, you and 2 others, north of Cedar Bluff by the old mine shaft. You thought nobody saw, but somebody did. And if anything happens to me, that information goes to the federal marshal in Denver. Briggs's horse danced sideways, picking up on his rider's tension. The other men looked at each other, uncertain. "You have no proof," Briggs said, but his voice shook. "Don't need proof to start an investigation. Just need a name and a location. How long do you think your friends on the county board will protect you once federal men start digging?" Emily held her breath. The night seemed to hold its breath with her. Briggs stared at Wade, his hand creeping toward his gun. "Don't," Wade said quietly. "Because the moment you draw, my foreman puts a bullet through your spine. He's watching from the ridge with a Sharps rifle. And Ben doesn't miss." Briggs froze. His eyes flicked to the darkness behind Wade, searching. Emily looked too, saw nothing, but the bluff was perfect, the threat believable. Slowly, Briggs lowered his hand. His smile returned, but it was brittle now, forced. "This isn't over, Hollis." "No," Wade agreed, "but it's over for tonight. Get off my land." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Briggs jerked his reins, turning his horse. The other riders followed, melting back into the darkness. Emily watched them go, her hands shaking so hard she nearly dropped the rifle. Wade stood there for a full minute after they'd gone, staring into the night. Then he turned and walked back to the wagon, climbed up beside her. His face was gray. "That man Ben with the rifle," Emily said quietly. "Is he real?" Wade shook his head. "I don't have a foreman. Haven't for 3 years. Then we got lucky, and luck runs out." He picked up the reins. "Come on, let's get you inside." The wagon rolled forward again down the last slope toward the ranch house. As they pulled into the yard, the front door opened and a small woman emerged. Chinese, gray-haired, wearing a practical wool dress and an apron. She took one look at the children in the back of the wagon, and her face softened. "Mrs. Lynn," Wade said, climbing down. "We have guests." "Mrs." Lynn nodded once and moved to the wagon, helping the twins down with gentle hands. Cal followed, stumbling with exhaustion. Emily climbed down last, still clutching the rifle. "Inside," Mrs. Lynn said, her English accented but clear. "Hot water, food, beds." She herded the children toward the house like a mother hen. Emily started to follow, then looked back at Wade. He was unhitching the horses, moving slowly, his shoulders slumped. "Thank you," she said. Wade didn't look up. "Don't thank me yet." Briggs meant what he said. "This isn't over." "I know." "He'll come back with more men. Maybe the law. Maybe just hired guns." "I know," Emily said again. "But tonight we're safe. Tonight the children are warm. That's more than we had this morning." Wade finally met her eyes. In the lamplight from the house, she could see how tired he was. Bone-tired, soul-tired. Whatever ghosts he carried, they weighed heavy. "Go on inside," he said softly. "I'll be in shortly." Emily nodded and turned toward the house. The door was open, golden light spilling out onto the porch. Inside, she could hear Mrs. Lynn's gentle voice, the twins' answering murmurs, the creak of a pump handle as water filled a basin. It sounded like safety. It sounded like home. She stepped through the doorway and into the warmth. The house was bigger than it looked from outside. A wide main room with a stone fireplace, sturdy furniture, and woven rugs on the plank floor. A hallway led to what Emily assumed were bedrooms. The kitchen occupied one corner, dominated by a massive iron stove that radiated heat like a blessing. Mrs. Lynn had already seated Cal and the twins at a long wooden table and was ladling soup into bowls, real soup, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. The children stared at it like it might vanish if they blinked. "Eat slow," Mrs. Lynn instructed. "Sick yourself if you eat too fast." Lila picked up her spoon with trembling hands. Maisie followed suit. Cal just sat there, staring at the steam rising from his bowl. Emily set the rifle against the wall and moved to the table, sliding onto the bench beside her brother. She put a hand on his shoulder and felt him shaking. "It's all right," she whispered. "We're safe." "For how long?" She didn't have an answer. "Mrs." Lynn placed a bowl in front of Emily, then one for herself, and sat down across from them. For a few minutes, the only sound was spoons scraping bowls and the pop of logs in the fireplace. "Mr. Wade is good man," Mrs. Lynn said eventually. "He help you. You trust." Emily met her eyes. The older woman's gaze was steady, knowing. "He told me about his family," Emily said quietly. Mrs. Lynn nodded. "Very sad. He blamed himself, but was not his fault. Fever came fast, nothing to do. How long have you worked for him? 7 years? After his family, he needs someone. I need work. My husband dead, no family in San Francisco. We help each other. She paused. Like he help you now. The twins had finished their soup and were drooping where they sat, eyes half closed. Mrs. Lynn stood and beckoned. Come, I show you beds. She led them down the hallway to a large bedroom with 2 double beds, already made up with thick quilts and feather pillows. A fire crackled in a small hearth, taking the chill off the air. The twins didn't even wait for permission. They climbed into the nearest bed and burrowed under the covers like rabbits. Cal, you sleep there, Mrs. Lynn said, pointing to the second bed. Miss Emily, you come with me. Cal looked at Emily, uncertain. She squeezed his shoulder. I'm just next door. You're safe. He nodded slowly and trudged to the bed, kicking off his worn boots. Mrs. Lynn handed Emily a candle and led her to a smaller room across the hall, simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a wooden chest. You wash. I bring you clean nightgown. Mrs. Lynn gestured to the washstand, where a pitcher of warm water already waited. You sleep. Tomorrow we talk. Before Emily could respond, the older woman was gone, moving with surprising speed for her age. Emily stood alone in the quiet room, staring at the bed. It had been so long since she'd slept in a real bed. So long since she'd felt clean or warm or safe. Her hands moved automatically, unfastening her coat, her boots. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed her face, her hands, watching the water turn gray with dirt. Mrs. Lynn returned with a soft cotton nightgown and left without a word. Emily changed quickly, folding her filthy clothes into a pile. She should have felt relief, should have felt gratitude. Instead, she felt hollowed out, scraped clean of everything but exhaustion. She climbed into bed and pulled the quilt up to her chin. The mattress was soft. The pillow smelled like lavender. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. Outside, she heard the front door open and close. Wade's boots crossed the main room, paused, then continued down the hall. A door opened and shut. The house settled into silence. Emily stared at the ceiling, watching shadows from the dying fire dance across the beams. Tomorrow, Briggs would come back. Tomorrow, the fight would start again. But tonight, her siblings were warm and fed and sleeping soundly. Tonight, that had to be enough. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. Somewhere deep in the night, Emily woke. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the air too warm. Then memory flooded back and she sat up, heart pounding, listening. Footsteps on the porch, slow, deliberate. She slipped out of bed, grabbed her coat, and crept to the window. Moonlight painted the yard silver. A figure stood at the edge of the porch, leaning against the railing. Wade, still dressed, staring out at the darkness. Emily hesitated, then pulled on her coat and boots and slipped quietly out of her room. The hallway was dark, the house silent except for the tick of a clock somewhere. She crossed the main room and eased the front door open. Wade turned his head slightly. Can't sleep? Neither can you. He smiled faintly and turned back to the darkness. Emily moved to stand beside him, wrapping her coat tighter against the cold. What are you watching for? She asked. Riders, fires, anything that says Briggs is coming back tonight. You think he will? No, he'll wait. Gather his strength. Make sure he's got the law on his side when he moves. Wade paused. But I've been wrong before. Emily studied his profile. The hard line of his jaw, the weariness in his eyes. Why did you really help us? I told you. I know what you told me. But there's more. Wade was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. After my family died, I wanted to die too. Thought about it every day for a year, but I was too much of a coward to pull the trigger, so I just existed. Worked the ranch, ate, slept, repeated. Mrs. Lynn kept me alive, kept the place running. But I wasn't living, I was just haunting my own life. He turned to look at her, and Emily saw something raw in his expression. Then today, I saw your smoke. And I thought, here's a chance. Here's 4 people who need help, who deserve help. Maybe I can't bring my boys back. Maybe I can't undo the past, but maybe I can do this one thing right. Emily's throat tightened. We're not your redemption. I know, but maybe you're my reason to keep trying. The honesty in his words was almost unbearable. Emily looked away, blinking hard. Briggs won't stop, she said. No. He'll come with guns, with the law, with whatever it takes. Yes. So what do we do? Wade straightened, his expression hardening. We fight. Not with rifles. We'd lose. We fight the way Briggs can't. We find his weaknesses. We make allies. We turn his own people against him. How? I don't know yet, but we have time to figure it out. A few days, at least. He met her eyes. Are you willing to fight? Emily thought of her father, dead and buried under the prairie. Her mother, gone before that. The years of work and worry and struggle, all of it leading to this, 3 frightened children and a pile of debts. She thought of Briggs's cruel smile, the way he'd talked about her siblings like they were livestock. Yes, she said. I'm willing. Wade nodded slowly. Then get some sleep. You'll need your strength. Emily turned to go, then paused. Wade? Yeah? Thank you. For tonight. For not asking us to be anything more than what we are. He smiled, a real smile this time, tired but genuine. Get some rest, Emily. She went back inside, back to her borrowed room, back to the soft bed and warm quilts. This time, when she closed her eyes, she slept. Outside, Wade Hollis stood watch until dawn, scanning the darkness for enemies, and thought about second chances. Morning broke cold and clear, the kind of high country dawn that turned the world sharp and crystalline. Emily woke to voices in the main room, low, urgent tones that pulled her from sleep like a hook. She dressed quickly in her own clothes, still grimy but at least dry now, and emerged to find Wade and Mrs. Lynn standing by the window, looking out toward the road. How many? Wade asked. 3, maybe 4. Mrs. Lynn's voice was calm, but her hands were tight on the curtain edge. They not come close, just watching. Emily moved to the window and peered out. Sure enough, distant figures on horseback sat motionless on the ridge above the ranch, silhouetted against the pale sky. Too far to identify, but close enough to send a message. Briggs's men, Wade said quietly. He's putting pressure on us. Wants us to know we're being watched. What do we do? Emily asked. Nothing. Let them watch. We've got work to do inside. He turned from the window with the kind of deliberate calm that came from years of controlling fear. Mrs. Lynn moved to the stove and began pulling out pans, eggs, bacon. The smell filled the room, rich and grounding. Emily heard small footsteps and turned to see the twins padding out of their room, hair tangled, eyes still puffy with sleep. Cal followed a moment later, moving like an old man, all his 8 years weighing heavy. Hungry? Mrs. Lynn asked, and the twins nodded in unison. They ate breakfast in silence, punctuated only by the clink of forks and the crackle of the fire. Wade pushed food around his plate, barely eating, his gaze drifting repeatedly to the window. Emily forced herself to swallow each bite, knowing she'd need strength for whatever came next. The children ate with single-minded focus, shoveling eggs and bacon like they might never eat again. When the plates were cleared, Wade stood and gestured for Emily to follow him. They crossed to a small room off the main hall, a study lined with ledgers and maps, a heavy desk dominating the space. He closed the door and turned to face her. We need to talk about what happens next. Emily crossed her arms. You mean when Briggs comes back? When, not if. Wade pulled out a chair and dropped into it, suddenly looking every one of his 40-some years. He'll give us a day, maybe 2, to stew. Then he'll come with the sheriff and a writ of some kind, legal-looking enough to fool most folks. He'll claim he's got the right to take the children into his custody until the debt is settled. Can he do that? If the judge signs off on it, yes. And Judge Murphy will sign whatever Briggs puts in front of him. Wade rubbed his face. We need leverage, something that makes Briggs back down or forces him to negotiate. You threatened him last night. That thing about the mine shaft. A bluff based on rumor. I heard talk years ago about a man named Garrett who disappeared and Briggs's name was attached to it. But I don't have proof. If he calls my bluff, I've got nothing. Emily began to pace, her mind racing. What about going to the federal marshal yourself? You mentioned one in Denver. 3 days ride and Briggs would have the children sold before I got back. Besides, federal men don't move on rumors either. They need evidence, witnesses, something solid. Then we find something solid. Wade looked up at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. How? Briggs has been doing this for years, you said, selling children. That means records somewhere, bills of sale, transport receipts, something. Men like him, they keep records because they think they're untouchable. Even if those records exist, they're locked in his ranch house. He's got men guarding it day and night. Emily stopped pacing and met his gaze. Then we don't go to his ranch. We go to the people who helped him. Someone transported those children. Someone paid him. Somewhere along the chain, there's a weak link. Wade studied her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You're smarter than you look. I've had to be. He stood, moving to the desk and pulling out a hand-drawn map of the county. His finger traced a route west. There's a freight company in Cedar Bluff that handles transport for the mining camps. If Briggs was moving children west, he'd have used them. The owner's a man named Dutch Keller, not exactly honest, but not vicious either. If we can get him talking, he won't talk to you. Briggs probably pays him too well. No, but he might talk to someone who seems less threatening, someone who doesn't look like trouble. Emily understood immediately. You want me to go? Not alone. I'll be nearby, but out of sight. You go in, ask about work, about routes west, see what you can learn. If Dutch knows anything about Briggs's operation, he might let something slip to a young woman looking for transport. And if he doesn't? Then we try something else. But we're running out of time, Emily. Every day those men sit on that ridge, Briggs is tightening the noose. Emily thought of the twins' faces at breakfast, the way they'd finally started to relax, to believe they might be safe. The thought of them being dragged away, sold to God knows what kind of hell, made her stomach turn. When do we leave? This afternoon. I'll tell Mrs. Lynn to keep the children inside, keep the doors locked. We'll take the back trail, circle wide of those riders. Be back before dark. Emily nodded. I'll need better clothes. Something that doesn't look like I've been sleeping in barns. Wade's mouth twitched, almost a smile. I think we can manage that. An hour later, Emily stood in Mrs. Lynn's room, staring at herself in a small mirror. The older woman had produced a traveling dress in dark blue wool, simple but well made, with only a few small moth holes that could pass for wear. It fit reasonably well, though loose in the waist. Mrs. Lynn had also scrubbed Emily's face and hands, tamed her hair into a respectable braid, and produced a pair of good leather gloves. You look like lady now, Mrs. Lynn said with satisfaction, not like refugee. I am a refugee. Yes, but they don't need to know. She pressed a small drawstring purse into Emily's hands. Little money. You maybe need to buy something. Look real. Emily started to protest, but Mrs. Lynn's expression brooked no argument. She pocketed the purse and turned to find Cal standing in the doorway, watching her with worried eyes. Where are you going? Into town with Mr. Hollis. We'll be back before supper. You're leaving us. The fear in his voice nearly broke her. Emily knelt and pulled him close, feeling how thin he was under his borrowed shirt. I'm coming back, Cal. I promise. I need you to watch over the twins while I'm gone. Can you do that? He nodded against her shoulder, but his grip didn't loosen. Finally, she pulled back and looked him in the eye. Listen to Mrs. Lynn. Stay inside. Don't open the door for anyone except me or Mr. Hollis. Understand? What if those men come? They won't. And if they do, Mrs. Lynn knows what to do. She kissed his forehead. I love you. I'll be back soon. She stood and forced herself to walk away, out of the room, down the hall. Wade was waiting by the front door with 2 horses saddled, one his big bay gelding, the other a quieter mare. He handed Emily up into the saddle with the ease of long practice, then mounted his own horse. They rode out the back way through a narrow canyon that twisted between rock walls before opening onto a different valley entirely. The men on the ridge never saw them go. Wade set a steady pace, not hurrying but not dawdling either, and Emily found herself grateful for the silence. Her mind was already spinning through possibilities, rehearsing what she might say, how she might approach Dutch Keller without raising suspicion. Cedar Bluff appeared after 2 hours riding, a scrappy little town built around a crossroads, with a freight office, a general store, a saloon, and a scattering of houses. The freight office sat at the edge of town, a long, low building with corrals out back and a painted sign that read Keller and Sons Transport. Wade reined in at the edge of town behind a stand of cottonwoods that screened them from the main street. "I'll wait here. You go on foot, looks less suspicious. Ask about passage west, say you're trying to get to family in California. See what he offers, what he says. If it feels wrong, walk away." Emily dismounted and handed him the reins. "What if he recognizes me? Briggs might have sent descriptions around. You look different now, clean, respectable, not a desperate girl with 3 kids in tow." Wade paused. "But be careful. Dutch isn't violent, but he's greedy. If he thinks there's money in selling you out, he will." Emily nodded and started walking toward the freight office, keeping her pace steady, her shoulders back. She'd learned early how to make herself invisible when needed, but now she needed the opposite: confidence, purpose, the look of someone who belonged. The freight office smelled of hay, leather, and horse sweat. A broad-shouldered man with iron-gray hair looked up from a desk piled with manifests and bills of lading. His eyes flicked over Emily, assessing. "Help you, miss?" "I hope so." Emily kept her voice steady, friendly. "I'm looking for passage west. I heard you run freight to the mining camps." "We do, but we don't usually take passengers. Too much liability. I can pay, and I don't take up much space." Dutch Keller leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "Where are you headed?" "Sacramento. Eventually. I have an aunt there. Figured I'd catch a stage from one of the camps. Might be easier to take the train from Denver." "Can't afford the train, and I've got time." Emily let a note of desperation creep in. "Please, I've been trying to get out there for months. Every door I knock on, I hear the same thing. No passengers." Dutch studied her for a long moment. "You running from something?" "Just bad luck. Lost my family. Need a fresh start." "Uh-huh." He didn't sound convinced, but he didn't sound hostile either. "I might be able to help you. Got a freight run leaving in 3 days, headed to Silver Creek. From there you could get another wagon to the rail line." He paused. "Cost you $20. Emily's heart sank. $20 was a fortune, but she kept her face neutral. "That's steep." "It's fair. Food, protection, guaranteed arrival. Some folks would pay twice that." "Some folks meaning young women?" Dutch's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "Meaning anyone who needs to disappear and doesn't ask questions." There it was. The opening. Emily leaned forward slightly. "I heard you helped a family get west a few months back. The Prestons. Friend of mine said you got them all the way to the Nevada camps, no trouble." Dutch's face went carefully blank. "Don't know any Prestons." "Really? Because my friend said—" "Your friend was mistaken." His voice had gone flat, hard. "Now you want passage or not? Because I've got work to do." Emily read the warning in his tone, the sudden tension in his posture. She'd pushed too far, too fast. She forced a smile. "I'll think about it. $20 is a lot of money." "It is. But if you're serious, you come back tomorrow with cash. We'll talk." Emily nodded and turned to leave, feeling his eyes on her back all the way to the door. Outside, she walked slowly down the street, resisting the urge to run. She'd learned something, even if it was just confirmation that Dutch Keller knew more than he was saying. She was halfway back to the cottonwoods when a voice called out behind her. "Miss!" Emily turned. A young man stood in the alley beside the freight office, maybe 20, thin, with nervous eyes. One of Dutch's sons, she guessed. "You asked about the Prestons," he said quietly. Emily's pulse quickened. "You know them?" "Knew them. Hauled them west 6 months ago. 3 kids, parents both dead. Mr. Briggs paid my father to take them to a camp outside Virginia City. Said they had family there." He swallowed hard. "They didn't have family. Briggs sold them to a mine operation. I found out later. Kids were working underground 12 hours a day." Emily felt sick. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I was there when we dropped them off. Saw the look on the littlest one's face when she realized what was happening. His voice cracked. I tried to tell my father it was wrong, but he said business was business. I haven't been able to sleep right since. Do you have proof? Records? My father keeps ledgers, every transport, every payment. It's all written down. Names, dates, amounts. He thinks nobody will ever look, that Briggs has everyone too scared. Where are the ledgers? In the office, locked drawer in the desk. He glanced back toward the building. I can't get them. He'd know it was me, but if someone else... I understand. Emily met his eyes. Thank you for telling me. He nodded and slipped back into the alley, disappearing like smoke. Emily turned and walked quickly toward the trees where Wade was waiting. Her hands were shaking. Wade took one look at her face and dismounted. What happened? She told him everything, the conversation with Dutch, the encounter with the sun. Wade listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each sentence. Ledgers, he said finally. That's what we need. Proof in Briggs's own handwriting, with Dutch's records to back it up. The sun can't get them. Dutch would know. Then we have to. Wade stared toward the freight office, calculating. Tonight, after dark. I'll go in, find the desk, get the ledgers. That's breaking and entering. If I'm caught, I'll deal with it. But we need those records, Emily. It's the only way to stop Briggs. Emily wanted to argue, to find another way, but she knew he was right. They were out of options and out of time. I'm coming with you. No. I'm smaller. I can get through a window easier, and if something goes wrong, 2 sets of hands are better than one. Wade looked like he wanted to argue, but finally he nodded. We'll come back after midnight. In and out, fast and quiet. They rode back to the ranch in silence, the weight of what they were planning pressing down like a physical thing. When they arrived, the men were still on the ridge, still watching. Mrs. Lynn met them at the door, her face tight with worry. Children, fine, but men come closer this afternoon. Ride down to fence line, look around, then leave. They're testing our defenses, Wade said grimly, seeing how close they can get. Emily went to find the children and found them in the main room, the twins drawing pictures on scraps of paper while Cal sat at the window, keeping watch like a small soldier. Her heart ached at the sight. Emmy! Lila jumped up and ran to her, Maisie close behind. We were good. We stayed inside like you said. I know you were. I'm proud of you. She hugged them both, then looked at Cal. You too. Good job keeping watch. He gave her a tired smile. When can we stop hiding? Soon, she lied. Very soon. That evening passed in tense quiet. They ate dinner without tasting it. Wade cleaned his revolver methodically, checking the cylinder, loading and unloading. Mrs. Lynn knitted by the fire, her needles clicking in steady rhythm. Emily tried to read to the twins from a book Mrs. Lynn produced, but the words blurred on the page. Finally, she put the children to bed, tucking them in tight, kissing each forehead. Cal grabbed her hand as she turned to go. You're leaving again, aren't you? Emily hesitated, then nodded. Just for a little while. I'll be back before you wake up. Promise? Promise. She pulled free gently and left the room before he could see her face. In the hallway, Wade was waiting, dressed in dark clothes, a canvas sack slung over his shoulder. Ready? Emily nodded. They slipped out the back door into the cold night, moving like shadows toward the barn. The horses were already saddled. They mounted and rode out again, taking the same hidden trail, the moon their only light. Cedar Bluff was dark when they arrived, just a few scattered lamps in windows. The freight office sat in deeper shadow, silent and still. Wade tied the horses in the trees again, and they approached on foot, keeping to the edges, using every bit of cover. The front door was locked. Wade circled the building, testing windows, and found one at the back that gave slightly when he pushed. He worked his knife under the sash, lifting carefully, until the window slid open with a soft scrape. I'll go first, he whispered. Make sure it's clear. He boosted himself through and disappeared into the darkness. Emily waited, every nerve screaming, listening for shouts or gunfire or any sign of trouble. Then Wade's hand appeared in the window. Come on! She grabbed his wrist and he hauled her through. Inside the office was pitch black, smelling of dust and ink. Wade pulled out a small, dark lantern, opened the shutter just enough to cast a thin beam of light. The desk, Emily whispered. They moved across the room carefully, avoiding boxes and furniture. The desk was exactly where it had been that afternoon, the drawers locked tight. Wade pulled out his knife again and worked the lock on the bottom drawer. It clicked open. Inside were 3 leather-bound ledgers, pages filled with neat handwriting. Wade pulled them out, opened one, and held the lantern close. Emily read over his shoulder. Names, dates, amounts paid, destinations. And there, 6 months back. Preston family, 3 children. Paid by S. Briggs. Delivered to Consolidated Mining, Virginia City, $450. Before that, Thompson children. 4. Delivered to Railroad Camp, Nevada, $600. Before that, Crawford girl. Age 9. Domestic placement, San Francisco, $200. Page after page of lives sold like cattle. This is it, Wade breathed. This is enough. A floorboard creaked behind them. They spun. Dutch Keller stood in the doorway, holding a shotgun leveled at Wade's chest. Thought I heard something, Dutch said calmly. Should have known you'd be back. Recognized you this afternoon, girl. Took me a while, but I figured it out. You're one of those Mercer kids Briggs is looking for. Emily's mouth went dry. Wade shifted slightly, positioning himself between her and the gun. We're taking these ledgers, Wade said quietly. You can let us walk out, or you can shoot me and explain to the federal marshal why you've got records of selling children to mine camps. Federal marshal? Dutch laughed. You think anyone cares about a few orphans? This is the territory, Hollis. We take care of our own problems. Is that what you tell yourself? Emily found her voice, stepped out from behind Wade. That those children were problems? That 9-year-old girl you sold for domestic placement? Was she a problem? Dutch's face twitched. That was different. She had no family, no prospects. At least she's got food and shelter now. She's a slave. She's alive, which is more than she'd be on her own. Wade took a slow step forward. You know this is wrong, Dutch. Your son knows it. That's why he talked to us. Dutch's jaw clenched. My son is young and stupid and doesn't understand how the world works. He understands that selling children is evil. Seems pretty simple to me. You break into my office, steal my property, and lecture me about morality? Dutch's finger tightened on the trigger. You got stones, Hollis. Shoot me, and those ledgers go straight to Denver. I've got copies being held by someone Briggs can't touch. If I don't come back, they get mailed. You want that? It was another bluff, but Emily kept her face neutral, praying Dutch would believe it. The older man's eyes narrowed, calculating. You're lying. Maybe. Want to bet your neck on it? The silence stretched. Emily could hear her own heartbeat, could feel sweat trickling down her spine despite the cold. Dutch stared at Wade, then at the ledgers, then back at Wade. Even if I let you walk, Briggs will know. He'll come after me. Not if you tell him we forced you, held you at gunpoint, tied you up, stole the ledgers while you were helpless. Hell, I'll knock you around a little if it helps sell the story. Dutch's expression shifted, still angry, but now calculating. And what do I get out of this? You get to sleep at night, Emily said quietly. You get to look your son in the eye without shame. You get to be something better than Silas Briggs's errand boy. Dutch flinched like she'd struck him. For a long moment he stood there, the shotgun wavering slightly. Then, slowly, he lowered it. Take the ledgers. Get out. And if anyone asks, you put a gun to my head. Wade stepped forward and hit him. Not hard, just enough to split his lip and raise a bruise. Dutch staggered back, swearing. Sorry, Wade said, not sounding sorry at all. He grabbed a length of rope from the corner and tied Dutch to the chair, tight but not cruel. We'll send someone to untie you in the morning. Dutch spat blood. You're a damn fool, Hollis. This won't stop Briggs. He's got too many people in his pocket. Maybe. But now we've got proof. That changes everything. Wade grabbed the ledgers and headed for the window. Emily followed, pausing to look back at Dutch one more time. Your son's a good man, she said. Don't punish him for having a conscience. Dutch said nothing, just stared at the floor. Emily climbed through the window and dropped into the night. Wade was already on his horse, the ledgers safely stowed in his saddlebag. They rode hard and fast, not stopping until they were miles from town, deep in the hills where no one could follow. Only then did Wade rein in, breathing hard, and look at her. That was too close. But we got them. Emily's hands were shaking with adrenaline, fear, relief, all tangled together. We actually got them. Wade pulled out one of the ledgers and flipped it open, studying the pages in the moonlight. This is enough to hang Briggs, maybe not legally, but in the eyes of anyone with a conscience. We take this to the federal marshal, he'll have to investigate. That's 3 days' ride. I know, but it's our best shot. Wade closed the ledger and looked at her. I'll leave it first light. You stay with the children, keep them safe. Mrs. Lynn will help. I'll be back in a week, maybe less. And if Briggs comes while you're gone, then you run. Take the children and run as far and fast as you can. Don't try to fight him. Emily wanted to argue, to insist they find another way, but she knew there wasn't one. They were committed now. The only path was forward. They rode back to the ranch as dawn began to gray the eastern sky. The house was still dark, still quiet. Wade took the horses to the barn while Emily slipped inside, past the sleeping children, past Mrs. Lynn dozing in her chair by the fire. She made it to her room and collapsed on the bed, still dressed, too exhausted to even remove her boots. Outside, the first birds began to sing. On the ridge above the ranch, Briggs's men watched and waited, patient as vultures. Emily woke to shouting. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and rushed to the window. Below, in the yard, Wade stood facing a line of riders. Not 5 this time, but 12, spread in a wide semicircle that blocked every escape route. At their center sat Silas Briggs on a black stallion, looking like a judge about to pronounce sentence. Behind him, wearing a tarnished badge, was a heavy-set man Emily didn't recognize. She pulled on her boots and ran for the main room. Mrs. Lynn was already there, standing at the window with a rifle in her hands, her face carved from stone. The children huddled together on the far side of the room, Cal's arms wrapped protectively around the twins. "What's happening?" Emily demanded. "Emily, Sheriff came," Mrs. Lynn said quietly. "With Briggs. They want you and children." Emily's stomach dropped. She moved to the window and looked out. Wade's voice carried clear in the cold morning air. "You have no authority here, Morton. This is my property." The heavy-set man shifted in his saddle. "I got a writ from Judge Murphy, Hollis. Legal claim on those Mercer children. They're to be remanded to Mr. Briggs's custody until their father's debts are settled." "Their father is dead. The debt died with him." "Law says different." Sheriff Morton pulled a folded paper from his coat and waved it. "Says here the debt transfers to surviving family members. That includes the children." "Children can't be held liable for debts. That's not law. That's slavery." Briggs spoke up, his voice smooth as silk. "It's complicated, Hollis, but the judge has made his ruling. The children come with us today, or you'll be charged with obstruction and harboring fugitives." Wade stood perfectly still, his hand resting near his revolver. Emily could see the calculation in his posture, the terrible math of 12 guns against 1. She couldn't let him die for them. She moved toward the door. Mrs. Lynn caught her arm. "No, you go out there, they take you." "They'll take us anyway. At least this way Wade lives." "Mr. Wade has plan. You trust." Emily wanted to believe her, but looking at the odds in the yard, she couldn't see how any plan would work. She pulled free of Mrs. Lynn's grip and opened the door, stepping out onto the porch. Every head turned. Briggs smiled. "Miss Mercer, how good of you to join us. Saves us the trouble of dragging you out." Emily ignored him, looking only at Wade. His face was tight with anger, with fear for her. She walked down the steps and stood beside him. "I'll go with you," she said clearly, "but the children stay here." Briggs laughed. "That's not how this works, girl. The writ says all 4 of you. The writ is illegal, and you know it. You want to steal children to sell them to mines and brothels, but you're too much of a coward to admit it." The smile vanished from Briggs's face. "Careful with your accusations." "Why? You going to shoot me in front of the sheriff? In front of witnesses?" Emily took a step forward. "Or are you going to pretend this is legal just a little longer?" Sheriff Morton cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Miss, the law is the law. I'm just enforcing it." "You're enforcing nothing. You're helping a criminal kidnap children for profit." Emily's voice rang across the yard. "And when the federal marshal in Denver sees the ledgers we took from Dutch Keller's office, everyone's going to know exactly what you are." The silence that followed was absolute. Briggs's face went white, then purple. His hand dropped to his gun. "You're bluffing," he said, but his voice shook. Wade spoke quietly. "She's not. We have the ledgers. Every transaction, every child you sold, every dollar you made. Names, dates, destinations. It's all written down in Dutch's neat handwriting, co-signed by you. Those ledgers are private property. Those ledgers are evidence of human trafficking, and they're already on their way to Denver." Another bluff. But Emily kept her face blank, willing Briggs to believe it. He stared at Wade, then at her, his mind visibly racing. "You're lying. Dutch would never— Dutch had a shotgun on us and let us walk out with his records. Ask yourself why." Wade's voice was cold. "Maybe because even he has limits. Maybe because his son couldn't live with what you've been doing." One of the riders shifted nervously. Another exchanged glances with the man beside him. Emily could see doubt spreading through the group like cracks in ice. Sheriff Morton leaned forward. "Briggs, if there's evidence of—" "There's no evidence," Briggs snapped. "They're lying to buy time." "Then you won't mind if we wait for the federal marshal to arrive," Wade said. "If we're lying, he'll say so. If we're not—" He let the sentence hang. Briggs's hand tightened on his reins. His horse danced sideways, picking up on the tension. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Briggs smiled, a terrible smile, full of rage and calculation. "You think you're clever, Hollis. You think you've won, but all you've done is make this personal." He raised his voice, addressing the men behind him. "Change your plans, boys. We're not taking the children today. We're coming back tonight with enough men to burn this ranch to the ground. And when we're done, there won't be enough left of Wade Hollis to fill a whiskey bottle." He jerked his horse around and spurred it toward the ridge. The other riders followed, all except Sheriff Morton, who sat his horse looking deeply uncomfortable. "That was a threat of arson and murder," Wade said quietly. "You heard it." Morton's face flushed. "I didn't hear nothing, and you'd be wise to remember that Mr. Briggs has a lot of friends in this county. And you'd be wise to remember that threatening a federal witness is a hanging offense." The sheriff's eyes widened slightly. "You're bluffing about those ledgers. Ride to Denver and find out. Ask for Marshal James Holloway. Tell him Wade Hollis sent you. See what he says." Morton looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Wade's face stopped him. He turned his horse and rode after the others, leaving Wade and Emily standing alone in the yard. The moment the riders disappeared over the ridge, Wade's shoulders sagged. He turned to Emily, and she saw the fear in his eyes, real fear, bone deep. "We don't have until tonight," he said quietly. "Briggs won't wait. He'll come back in an hour, maybe 2, with enough men to overwhelm us. Then we run, load the wagon, take the children, get as far as we can before— Before what? We can't outrun them, not with 3 small children and a wagon." Wade looked back at the house, where Mrs. Lynn stood on the porch with the rifle still in her hands. "We need help, real help." Emily's mind raced. "The people in town. Some of them must know what Briggs is doing. If we can get them to stand with us—" "They're too scared. Briggs owns the judge, the sheriff, half the merchants. Anyone who stands against him loses everything." "Then what do we do?" Wade was quiet for a moment, staring at nothing. Then his face changed, hardened. "We make him think we're running, pack the wagon, make it obvious we're fleeing, lead him away from the ranch, away from the children." "That's suicide." "It's a chance. If we can get Briggs and his men to follow us, Mrs. Lynn can take the children north, to my cousin's place in Montana. It's 3 days hard travel, but she knows the way. Once they're safe, I can deal with Briggs." "Deal with him how? You'll be outnumbered 10-1. Wade met her eyes. "I know this country better than Briggs does. I know places to hide, places to make a stand. If I can whittle down his numbers, make it costly enough, he might back off. Or he might kill you." "Probably." Wade's voice was matter-of-fact, resigned. "But the children will be safe. That's what matters." Emily wanted to scream, to shake him, to find some other answer. But looking at his face, she knew he'd already made his decision. This was his redemption, his chance to save the family he couldn't save before. Nothing she said would change his mind. "I'm going with you," she said. "Emily, you need someone to watch your back, someone who can shoot." She crossed her arms. "And before you argue, remember I'm the one who got us those ledgers. I'm the one who faced down Briggs just now. I'm not helpless, Wade Hollis, and I'm not letting you die alone. Wade stared at her for a long moment. Then, impossibly, he smiled. A real smile, sad and proud at once. Your mother would be proud of you. You know that? Emily's throat tightened. My mother would tell me I'm being an idiot. That too. Wade turned toward the house. All right, we've got maybe an hour. Let's not waste it. They spent the next 45 minutes in organized chaos. Mrs. Lynn packed food and supplies for the children's journey north, bundling everything into saddlebags and small packs the twins could carry. Wade loaded the wagon with obvious cargo, blankets, tools, anything that would make it look like they were fleeing permanently. Emily gathered the children in the main room and knelt before them. You're going on an adventure, she said, keeping her voice steady. Mrs. Lynn is going to take you to a safe place way up north. You'll see mountains and rivers and maybe even bears. Lila's eyes went wide. Real bears. From a distance, I hope. Emily forced a smile. Cal, you're in charge. You listen to Mrs. Lynn. You help with the twins. You keep everyone safe. Can you do that? Cal's face was too old, too knowing. You're not coming. Not right away. But I'll find you, I promise. You promised you'd come back last time. And I did, didn't I? Emily pulled him close, breathing in the little boy smell of him, dirt and sweat and innocence. I will always come back to you, always. You believe me? He nodded against her shoulder, but she felt his tears soaking through her dress. The twins started crying too, clinging to her legs. Emily held them all, memorizing the weight of them, the warmth, praying this wouldn't be the last time. Finally, Mrs. Lynn touched her shoulder gently. Time to go. Emily kissed each child, Cal's forehead, Lila's cheek, Maisie's nose, and stood. Be brave. Be smart. Be safe. Mrs. Lynn led them toward the back door, where 3 horses stood saddled and waiting. Cal would ride with Mrs. Lynn, the twins sharing the second horse with supplies strapped to the third. Emily watched from the porch as they mounted up, as Mrs. Lynn checked the stirrups and tightened the cinches. Wade appeared beside her. She'll get them through. She's tougher than she looks. I know. Emily's voice cracked. I know. They watched until the small group disappeared into the trees, heading north toward the hidden trails only Wade and Mrs. Lynn knew. Then the ranch was empty, silent except for the wind. Wade turned to Emily. Last chance to change your mind. Not a chance. Then help me finish loading the wagon. We need to make this convincing. They worked quickly, piling more supplies into the wagon bed, hitching the horses. Wade grabbed the ledgers from his study and tucked them into a leather satchel, which he slung across his body. Emily collected weapons, the rifle, Wade's spare revolver, a shotgun from the barn, and all the ammunition they could carry. When everything was ready, they climbed onto the wagon seat. Wade took the reins and looked at the ranch house one last time, at the stone walls and good timber, at the home he'd built after losing everything. Might not see it again, he said quietly. Then we better make sure we do. He smiled slightly and snapped the reins. The wagon lurched forward, down the main road this time, visible to anyone watching. They weren't subtle about it. They wanted Briggs to see them running. They'd traveled maybe 3 miles when Emily spotted the dust cloud behind them. Riders, moving fast, closing the distance. Here they come, Wade said grimly. How many? Hard to say. At least 15, maybe more. Emily checked the rifle, made sure it was loaded. Her hands were steady now. Her fear transformed into something colder, sharper. If this was how it ended, she'd make it count. The riders drew closer, close enough that Emily could make out individual faces. Briggs led the pack, his expression murderous. Beside him rode men she didn't recognize, hard-faced and armed to the teeth. Hired guns, probably. Men who killed for money and didn't ask questions. Wade urged the horses faster, the wagon bouncing over ruts and stones. They were heading into the hills now, toward the narrow canyons and steep grades. Dangerous country for a wagon, but it would slow the riders too. A shot cracked behind them. Emily flinched as the bullet whined past. Warning shot, Wade said. They want us alive. At least until they get those ledgers. What if we destroy them? Burn them right here? Then we have no leverage, and they kill us anyway. Wade hauled on the reins, turning the wagon sharply onto a side trail. "Hold on!" The trail climbed steeply, winding between rock outcroppings. The horses labored, foam flecking their sides. Behind them, the riders had to slow, picking their way single file through the narrow passage. Emily twisted in her seat and fired, not to hit, but to make them keep their distance. One of the riders returned fire. The bullet splinged off a rock inches from the wagon wheel. "They're getting bolder," Emily said. Wade didn't answer. His jaw was set, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. Emily saw what he was aiming for, a cluster of boulders near the top of the ridge, offering cover and high ground. If they could reach it, they might have a chance. The wagon crested the ridge and Wade hauled it to a stop behind the boulders. They jumped down, grabbing weapons and ammunition. Emily positioned herself behind one rock, Wade behind another. The trail below was still empty, but she could hear hoofbeats, voices calling back and forth. "When they come up," Wade said quietly, "aim for the horses first. Make them come to us on foot." Emily nodded. Her heart was pounding, but her breathing was steady. She sighted down the rifle, waiting. The first rider appeared around the bend, one of Briggs's hired men, scanning the ridge above. Emily squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed like thunder. The rider's horse screamed and went down, throwing its rider hard into the rocks. The man didn't get up. More riders surged forward. Wade fired twice, methodically, and two more horses fell. The riders scattered, diving for cover, shouting orders. Gunfire erupted from below, bullets ricocheting off the boulders, kicking up dust and rock chips. Emily reloaded and fired again. Again. The noise was deafening. Gun smoke stung her eyes. She lost track of time, lost track of everything except the rhythm. Aim, fire, reload. Then Wade grunted and fell back. Emily's heart stopped. She scrambled to him, saw blood spreading across his left shoulder. His face was gray, but his eyes were focused. "Just winged me," he gasped. "Keep firing." Emily tore a strip from her skirt and pressed it against the wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. Wade pushed her hand away. "No time. They're regrouping for a rush. Get back to your position." She wanted to argue, but knew he was right. She grabbed the rifle and returned to the boulder, peering down. Sure enough, Briggs's men were gathering for a coordinated assault, using the rocks for cover as they advanced uphill. "Wade," she said quietly, "there's too many." "I know. We can't hold them." "I know that too." Emily looked at him, this stubborn, broken, brave man who'd risked everything for strangers. "Thank you," she said, "for giving the children a chance." Wade met her eyes. "It was an honor." They turned back to the rocks, ready for the final stand. The hired guns were 30 yards away now, moving in a coordinated line, firing as they came. Emily picked her targets, fired, watched men fall or dive for cover. But for every one she stopped, two more advanced, 20 yards, 15. This was it. Emily's hands were shaking now, her ammunition running low. Beside her, Wade fired his revolver one-handed, his wounded shoulder useless. 10 yards. Emily closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, thought of Cal and the twins, safe with Mrs. Lynn. Thought of her parents, waiting somewhere beyond. Thought. Gunfire erupted from behind them. Emily spun, expecting more attackers, but instead she saw riders pouring over the opposite ridge. A dozen men, maybe more, firing down into Briggs's forces. At their head rode a young man she recognized, Dutch Keller's son. The hired guns scattered, caught between two fires. Briggs screamed orders, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Two of his men threw down their weapons. Another took a bullet and fell. The tide was turning. Dutch Keller's son reached Emily and Wade, swinging down from his horse. "My father sent us. Said he owed you for not killing him." He looked at the carnage below. "Looks like we got here just in time." More riders crested the ridge behind him. Townsmen, ranchers, people Emily had never seen before. One of them, a gray-haired woman on a paint mare, rode straight up to Wade. "Heard Briggs was trying to burn you out," she said calmly. "Figured it was time someone stood up to that bastard." Wade stared at her. "Mrs. Patterson?" "Don't look so surprised, Hollis. Half the county's been waiting for someone to make the first move against Briggs. You gave us the excuse." She raised her rifle. "Now let's finish this." The fight that followed was brief and brutal. Briggs's hired guns, outnumbered and outgunned, broke and ran. A few tried to make a stand and were cut down. Within minutes, it was over. Silas Briggs himself sat on the ground in the middle of the carnage, his hands raised, his face ashen. Sheriff Morton lay nearby, wounded but alive, groaning. Dutch Keller's son walked up to Briggs and looked down at him with disgust. "My father wants you to know he's testifying. Against you. Against everyone involved. He's done protecting monsters." Briggs's mouth worked, but no sound came out. Mrs. Patterson dismounted and approached Wade. "We'll hold them until the federal marshal arrives. My husband rode for Denver this morning. Should be back with law by week's end." She glanced at Wade's bloody shoulder. "You need a doctor." "I'll live." Wade looked around at the faces. Townspeople, ranchers, ordinary folk who'd decided enough was enough. "Why did you come? You all knew the risks." Mrs. Patterson's expression softened. "Because you stood first. Because you showed us it could be done. And because those ledgers you mentioned, Dutch's son told us what was in them. Made us all sick. Made us realize we'd been letting evil happen in our own backyard." Emily felt tears burning her eyes, but refused to let them fall. These people, strangers, most of them, had risked their lives for children they'd never met. For a principle. For decency. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough. "All of you." An older man tipped his hat. "Just doing what should have been done years ago, miss." They loaded Briggs, Morton, and the wounded hired guns onto horses and started back toward town. Wade could ride but needed help mounting. Emily stayed close beside him, watching his face for signs he was about to fall. As they descended from the ridge, Wade looked at her. "The children?" "Safe by now. Mrs. Lynn knows what she's doing. We'll ride north tomorrow. Bring them home." Emily nodded, but home felt like a strange word now. The ranch had been Wade's home. But what was it to her? A temporary refuge? A new beginning? She didn't know yet. They reached Cedar Bluff as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of fire. The townspeople gathered in the street, staring at the prisoners, at the blood-stained riders. Word spread fast. By the time they reached the sheriff's office, half the town had turned out. Dutch Keller himself stood on the steps of his freight office, his face bruised from Wade's punch, his eyes red. When he saw his son, he straightened. "I'm sorry," he called out. "For everything. I'm making it right." His son nodded once, acceptance and forgiveness in the gesture. They locked Briggs and the others in the town jail, posting guards. A doctor was summoned for Wade, who endured having the bullet dug out of his shoulder without complaint. Emily sat beside him, holding his good hand, amazed that they were both still breathing. When it was done and Wade's shoulder was bandaged, they walked outside together. The stars were coming out, hard and bright. The air smelled of smoke and blood and horses, but underneath it Emily caught the scent of sage and winter. "It's really over," she said wonderingly. "Not quite. Still have to wait for the federal marshal, make sure the charges stick. But yes, the worst is over." Emily looked up at him. "What happens to us now? To me and the children?" Wade was quiet for a moment. "I was thinking. That ranch is too big for one man, and those children need a home. A real home, not just a hiding place." He met her eyes. "If you're willing, I'd like you to stay. All of you. Help me turn that ranch into something worth keeping." "As what? Hired help?" "As family." Wade's voice was soft. "I know I can't replace your father, and you're not my daughter, but maybe we could be something. People who look out for each other, people who matter." Emily felt something crack open in her chest, all the fear and grief and loneliness she'd been carrying for so long, finally finding release. "I'd like that." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Wade smiled, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked young, hopeful, alive in a way that went beyond just breathing. They stood there together, two people who'd walked through fire and come out changed, watching the stars wheel overhead in the vast Montana sky. Somewhere to the north, 3 children slept safe under Mrs. Lynn's watchful eye, dreaming of bears and mountains and home. And for the first time in longer than Emily could remember, the future felt like something worth reaching for. They rode north at first light, Wade and Emily on fresh horses borrowed from Mrs. Patterson's stable. Wade's shoulder was stiff and painful despite the laudanum the doctor had given him, but he refused to wait another day. The children had been gone for 36 hours, and every mile between them felt like a weight on his chest. Emily rode beside him in silence, scanning the trail ahead for any sign of Mrs. Lynn's passage. The older woman was skilled at covering tracks, which meant safety for the children but made following nearly impossible. Wade knew the route by memory, north through the Medicine Bow Range, following old trapping trails his father had shown him 40 years ago. If Mrs. Lynn kept to the plan, they'd intersect by nightfall. The country grew wilder as they climbed, pine forests giving way to stands of aspen that shimmered gold in the morning sun. The air thinned and sharpened, carrying the smell of snow from the high peaks. Emily pulled her coat tighter and urged her horse forward, matching Wade's pace without complaint. Around midday, they stopped to rest the horses and eat the cold biscuits Mrs. Patterson had packed. Wade lowered himself carefully from the saddle, favoring his wounded shoulder, and immediately regretted it when pain shot through his arm like lightning. Emily was beside him instantly. "You're pushing too hard. I'm fine. You're bleeding through your bandage." Wade looked down and saw the dark stain spreading across his shirt. He'd torn something when he dismounted, opened the wound fresh. Emily made him sit on a fallen log while she peeled back his coat and shirt to examine the damage. "It needs to be cleaned and rewrapped," she said, her voice matter-of-fact but her hands gentle. "If it gets infected out here, you'll be in real trouble." "We don't have time. We have 10 minutes. She pulled supplies from her saddlebag, clean cloth, whiskey, needle, and thread the doctor had given her. "This is gonna hurt." She poured whiskey over the wound and Wade hissed through his teeth, vision going white at the edges. Emily worked quickly, efficiently, cleaning away blood and checking for signs of infection. Her fingers were steady as she restitched the torn flesh, her face set in concentration. "Where did you learn this?" Wade managed through gritted teeth. "My mother. She tended to anyone who needed help, neighbors, travelers, even men from the railroad camps when they got hurt." Emily tied off the last stitch and began wrapping fresh bandaging. She said healing was women's work because women understood that life was worth preserving, no matter the cost. "She sounds like she was something special." Emily's hands paused for just a moment. "She was. She held our family together when everything was falling apart. When Pa started drinking after the first bad harvest, when creditors came calling, when the neighbors started looking at us like we were cursed. She kept us fed, kept us warm, kept us hoping that tomorrow might be better." "What happened to her?" "Pneumonia, 3 winters ago." Emily's voice went flat, distant. "We couldn't afford a doctor. Pa tried everything, hot compresses, mustard plasters, prayers. Nothing worked. She just got weaker and weaker until one morning she didn't wake up." She finished tying the bandage and sat back. "Pa never recovered, started borrowing money to keep the farm going, gambling on crops that never came in. By the time he died, we owed more than the land was worth 10 times over." Wade reached out with his good hand and covered hers. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She had a good life even when it was hard. She had us. That's more than some people get." Emily pulled her hand away and began repacking the medical supplies. "We should keep moving." They mounted up and continued north, following a ridgeline that offered long views of the valley below. Wade kept watching for smoke, for any sign of campfire or movement, but saw nothing. The wilderness was vast and empty, indifferent to their urgency. As afternoon faded toward evening, Emily pulled up short and pointed. "There." Wade followed her gaze and saw it. A thin ribbon of smoke rising from a grove of cottonwoods near a creek. Too small for a hunting camp, too controlled for a wildfire. Wade felt hope and fear war in his chest. They approached carefully, Wade's good hand on his revolver. But as they drew closer, a familiar voice called out, "Mr. Wade, is that you?" Cal emerged from the trees, rifle in hand, looking like a miniature soldier. Behind him came Mrs. Lynn, calm and unruffled, as though leading 3 children through wilderness was nothing more than an afternoon stroll. The twins appeared last, faces dirty but eyes bright, chattering about deer they'd seen and how high the mountains were. Emily was off her horse before it stopped moving, running to her siblings and gathering them in her arms. Wade watched her hold them, saw the way her shoulders shook with relief, and felt something tight in his chest finally loosen. Mrs. Lynn approached him, studied his bloody shoulder, and shook her head. "You tear stitches." Foolish man. Good to see you too, Wade said, smiling despite the pain. Children safe. Good riders, all of them. Cal very brave. She glanced back at the small camp. We wait for you. I know you come. They made camp together as darkness fell, building up the fire now that stealth was no longer necessary. Mrs. Lynn produced a pot and made stew from dried meat and wild onions she'd gathered. The twins sat close to Emily, never quite letting her out of reach, while Cal peppered Wade with questions about the fight, the prisoners, whether Briggs was really going to jail. He's going somewhere worse than jail if the federal marshal has his way, Wade said. Human trafficking carries a hanging sentence in the territories. Cal's eyes went wide. They're going to hang him? Maybe. Depends on what the judge decides. But he won't hurt anyone else. That's what matters. After dinner, Mrs. Lynn settled the children in their bedrolls near the fire. Emily and Wade sat apart, watching the flames paint shadows on the surrounding trees. The stars were coming out, impossibly bright at this altitude. What happens when we get back? Emily asked quietly. Wade knew what she was really asking. The ranch becomes home. We rebuild what got damaged in the fight, fix the barn, maybe add another room to the house for the children. You and Cal take one room, the twins share another. Mrs. Lynn keeps hers. I don't need much space. That's not what I meant. Wade looked at her. In the firelight, she looked older than 19, carved by loss into something harder, sharper. But her eyes held a question that was purely young and uncertain. You asked me to stay as family, she said. What does that mean? Am I your ward, your housekeeper, your charity case? None of those things. Wade struggled to find the right words. I was thinking, partner, maybe. You help run the ranch, make decisions about the stock and the land. I teach you what I know about breeding horses, managing grazing, reading weather. You already know how to work hard and think on your feet. The rest is just learning. And in return? In return, you and your siblings have a home, safety, a future that doesn't involve running or hiding or wondering where the next meal comes from. He paused. But if that doesn't sit right with you, if you want something different, we'll figure it out. I'm not trying to own you, Emily. I'm trying to give you choices. Emily stared into the fire for a long time. My whole life, men have tried to tell me what I'm worth. Pa said I was worth a husband and children someday, that my job was to be pretty and quiet and useful. The creditors said I was worth whatever they could squeeze from our land. Briggs said I was worth whatever some mine boss would pay for young hands. She looked at Wade. You're the first man who's asked me what I think I'm worth. So what do you think? I think I'm worth more than being pretty and quiet. I think I'm strong enough to work a ranch, smart enough to learn, stubborn enough to make it succeed. Her voice steadied, grew certain. I think I could be a good partner, if you're willing to treat me like one. Wade extended his hand. Partners, then. Emily took it, her grip firm and calloused. Partners. They shook on it, a contract sealed with nothing but words and trust and the firelight bearing witness. Across the camp, Mrs. Lynn watched them and smiled to herself, pleased in a way that had nothing to do with words. They stayed at the camp one more night to let Wade's shoulder rest and the children recover from their ordeal. The next morning dawned clear and cold, frost painting the grass white. They broke camp efficiently, everyone knowing their role now, and headed south toward home. The journey took 2 days. They traveled slowly, mindful of Wade's injury and the children's shorter stamina. At night they camped under the stars, telling stories around the fire. Cal wanted to hear about the fight again and again, hungry for the details of how ordinary people had stood up to Briggs. The twins were more interested in the horses, petting the mares and feeding them bits of apple from Mrs. Lynn's supplies. On the second afternoon, they crested the final ridge and saw the ranch spread out below. Stone house still standing, barns intact, the whole place looking solid and permanent against the autumn landscape. Emily reined in beside Wade. It's beautiful, she said softly. It's home, Wade corrected. You're home now, if you want it. They rode down together, a strange little family bound not by blood but by choice and survival and hope. As they approached the house, the front door opened and Mrs. Patterson emerged, followed by Dutch Keller's son and several other townspeople who'd apparently been keeping watch. "Federal Marshal arrived yesterday," Mrs. Patterson called out. "He's got Briggs and Morton locked up tight in Cedar Bluff. Wants to talk to you both when you're ready." "Tomorrow," Wade said, dismounting carefully. "Today we rest." The townspeople helped unload the horses and settled the children inside with hot cider and Mrs. Patterson's famous ginger cookies. Wade found himself pulled into the kitchen where the doctor was summoned once again to check his wound and pronounce it healing well despite Wade's best efforts to tear it open. Emily stood in the main room, watching Cal and the twins explore the house like it was new to them, touching furniture and running their hands along the walls. They were claiming it, she realized, making it theirs through touch and presence. The ranch was becoming home in a way that went deeper than words. That evening, after the townspeople had left and the children were in bed, Emily found Wade on the front porch. He was staring out at the dark hills, his good arm wrapped around his ribs, looking like a man who'd fought a war and lived to tell about it. "You should be resting," she said. "Can't sleep yet. Too much rattling around in my head." Emily settled beside him on the porch rail. "Thinking about your family?" Wade nodded slowly. "Wondering what they'd think of all this, of you and the children, of me trying to be something other than a ghost haunting his own life. I think they'd be proud. Maybe. Or maybe they'd think I was trying to replace them." "You're not replacing anyone," Emily said firmly. "You're honoring them by choosing to live again, to care again, to risk your heart on people who need you. That's not replacement. That's legacy." Wade looked at her, surprise and something like gratitude crossing his face. "When did you get so wise?" "About the time Briggs's men started shooting at me. Mortal danger has a way of clarifying things." She smiled slightly. "Besides, my mother used to say that grief isn't meant to be a prison. It's meant to be a teacher. It teaches us what we loved, what mattered, what we're willing to fight for when it's threatened. Your mother was a wise woman." She had to be. She didn't have the luxury of falling apart." Emily paused. "Neither do we." They sat together in companionable silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. In the distance, a coyote called and was answered. The night was alive with small sounds, wind in the pines, the creak of the barn, the soft breathing of horses in the corral. "Tomorrow, we face the marshal," Wade said eventually. "Make our statements, hand over the ledgers, let justice run its course. And after that? After that, we build. Repair what's broken, strengthen what's weak, make this place into something that can weather the next storm." He looked at her. "You ready for that kind of work?" "I've been ready my whole life." Wade smiled, and in that smile, Emily saw the man he must have been before grief hollowed him out. Strong, capable, alive with purpose. "Then let's get started." The next morning, they rode to Cedar Bluff together, leaving the children with Mrs. Lynn and a loaded rifle. The federal marshal turned out to be a lean, hard-eyed man named Holloway, who listened to their testimony with the focused attention of a predator marking prey. He examined the ledgers page by page, his expression growing darker with each entry. "This is more than enough," he said finally. "Briggs is done. So is Morton and anyone else who helped." He looked at Wade. "You did good work here, Hollis. Dangerous work, but good." "I had help," Wade gestured to Emily. "She's the one who got the ledgers in the first place." Holloway's gaze shifted to Emily, reassessing. "That took courage, miss, and quick thinking. The territory needs more people like you." "The territory needs more people willing to stand up to men like Briggs," Emily corrected. "We just happen to be desperate enough to try." "Desperation has its uses." Holloway closed the ledgers and stood. "I'll be taking Briggs to Denver for trial. Should hang within the month if the judge is feeling efficient. Morton too, probably, though he might get prison instead. The rest of Briggs's men will scatter. They were hired guns, no real loyalty. Without Briggs's money backing them, they're nothing." "What about the children he sold?" Emily asked. "The ones in the ledgers, can they be found, brought back?" Holloway's expression softened slightly. "I'll do what I can, but some of them have been gone for years. They might be impossible to trace, or too damaged to bring home. All we can do is try." Emily nodded, accepting the bitter truth. Some things, once broken, couldn't be fixed, but at least the breaking would stop now. That had to be enough. They left the marshal's office and walked through town together. People stopped to stare, to nod respectfully, to call out thanks. Emily found it disconcerting, being recognized, being praised. She'd spent so long trying to be invisible that visibility felt dangerous. "You'll get used to it," Wade said quietly, reading her discomfort. "I don't want to get used to it. I just want to go home." "Then let's go home." They collected supplies from the general store: flour, salt, coffee, fabric for new clothes for the children. The storekeeper refused payment, saying it was the least he could do after what they'd done for the county. Wade argued, but the man was stubborn. Finally, they accepted with as much grace as they could muster and loaded everything onto the wagon. As they drove out of town, Emily looked back one last time. Cedar Bluff looked different now, not threatening, but not quite welcoming either. It was just a place, neutral, full of people trying to survive. Some of them were brave and some were cowards, and most were somewhere in between, just like everywhere else. They reached the ranch by late afternoon and found organized chaos waiting. Mrs. Lynn had put the children to work cleaning, Cal sweeping the porch, the twins dusting furniture with rags nearly as big as they were. The house smelled of lye soap and wood smoke and something baking in the oven. "I teach them to help," Mrs. Lynn said with satisfaction. "House need many hands to keep clean." The twins ran to Emily immediately, showing off their dusty rags like trophies. Cal tried to look dignified, but couldn't hide his relief at seeing her safe. Emily hugged them all, breathing in the smell of their hair, the warmth of their small bodies. "Come help me unload," Wade called from the wagon. Cal ran to help, eager to prove himself useful. Together they carried in the supplies, stacking them in the kitchen and pantry, while Mrs. Lynn directed traffic like a general commanding troops. When everything was unloaded and put away, they gathered around the table for dinner, stew and fresh bread and canned peaches from the cellar. It was simple food, but it tasted like celebration, like victory, like home. After dinner, Wade pulled Emily aside. "I want to show you something." He led her to the barn and climbed the ladder to the loft, gesturing for her to follow. Up there, under the peaked roof, was a space that had been cleared out and furnished simply. A bed, a chair, a small table with an oil lamp. Late evening light streamed through the loft door, painting everything gold. "I thought maybe Cal could have this," Wade said. "Give him his own space. Let him feel like he's got some independence. He's at that age where sharing a room with sisters might start to chafe." He paused. "Unless you think it's too soon, or too far from the house." Emily walked around the space, touching the rough timber walls, testing the bed. It was perfect, private but not isolated, simple but comfortable. A place for a boy to grow into a young man. "He'll love it," she said. "Can we tell him tonight?" "I was hoping you'd say that." They climbed down and found Cal in the house, already getting ready for bed. Wade cleared his throat. "Cal, got something to show you. Come on." Cal followed them to the barn, curious and a little wary. When Wade showed him the loft, his eyes went wide. "This is for me? If you want it, your own space. You can come and go as you please, long as you keep it clean and don't leave the lamp burning when you sleep." Cal turned in a slow circle, taking it all in. "I never had my own room before." "Well, you do now." Wade handed him the lamp. "Welcome home, son." The word hung in the air, son, casual and momentous at once. Cal looked at Wade, then at Emily, then back at Wade. "Thank you," he said, his voice small and rough. "For everything, for saving us, for letting us stay." Wade knelt down, his wounded shoulder protesting, and looked Cal in the eye. "You don't have to thank me. You're family now. Family doesn't thank each other for doing what's right." Cal threw his arms around Wade's neck, nearly knocking him over. Wade caught him with his good arm and held on, his face pressed into the boy's shoulder, and Emily saw tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. She turned away to give them privacy and walked out into the evening. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in shades of fire and gold. The mountains stood dark against the light, eternal and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Silas Briggs sat in a cell awaiting justice. Somewhere out there, children who'd been sold into slavery might be found and freed. Somewhere out there, the world kept turning, full of cruelty and kindness in equal measure. But here, in this small corner of Montana territory, A broken family was becoming whole. A haunted man was learning to live again. And a 19-year-old girl who'd been running for her life had finally found a place to stand and fight and build something lasting. Emily looked back at the barn and saw Wade and Cal emerge together, the boy chattering excitedly about how he'd arrange his new room. She saw the house with its warm lights, the twins visible through the window as Mrs. Lynn read them a story. She saw the corrals and barns, the good land stretching away toward the hills, all of it solid and real and theirs. This was what her mother had wanted for them, not wealth or ease, but safety and dignity and the chance to become whoever they were meant to be. Emily smiled and walked back toward the house, toward the light and warmth and voices, toward home. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the mountains with snow that turned the world quiet and white. Emily stood at the kitchen window watching fat flakes drift past, marveling at how different everything looked covered in pristine blanket. Behind her, the twins were helping Mrs. Lynn roll out dough for biscuits, their small hands dusted with flour, their laughter bright in the warm room. 3 months had passed since the confrontation with Briggs. 3 months of learning to live without fear, without looking over her shoulder every moment. The adjustment had been harder than Emily expected. Her body still woke at every sound in the night, her hands still reached for weapons that no longer needed to be close. But slowly, day by day, the tension was loosening its grip. Wade entered through the back door, stamping snow from his boots, his breath clouding in the cold air. His shoulder had healed well, though he still favored it when the weather turned. He'd been out since dawn checking the stock, making sure the horses and cattle had enough feed to weather the storm. "Going to be a hard one," he said, pulling off his gloves. "Temperature's dropping fast. We'll need to bring extra wood in tonight." "Cal's already started," Emily said. "He's been hauling loads all morning." Wade smiled. The boy had taken to ranch work like he was born to it, rising before dawn to help with chores, asking endless questions about horses and cattle and land management. He'd grown 2 inches in 3 months and put on muscle from good food and hard work. The haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by something steadier, more hopeful. Mrs. Lynn pulled a tray of biscuits from the oven, the smell filling the kitchen. "You eat," she ordered Wade. "Too skinny still." "Yes, ma'am." Wade caught Emily's eye and grinned. Mrs. Lynn had made it her mission to fatten everyone up, convinced they were all half-starved despite evidence to the contrary. They ate together at the big table, the 5 of them fitting into a rhythm that felt natural now. The twins chattered about the snow, about whether they could build a snow fort after lunch. Cal asked Wade about breeding schedules for the spring foaling. Emily listened to all of it, still amazed that this was her life now. Ordinary conversations about ordinary things, no threat hanging over them, no fear poisoning every moment. After breakfast, while Mrs. Lynn settled the twins for their afternoon rest, Emily pulled on her coat and followed Wade out to the barn. She'd been learning the horse business from the ground up, how to evaluate bloodlines, how to train young stock, how to read the subtle signs that meant a mare was about to foal. Wade was a patient teacher, never condescending, always willing to explain the why behind every decision. Today they were working with a 2-year-old gelding, teaching him to accept a saddle and rider. The young horse danced sideways as Emily approached with the saddle blanket, ears pinned, uncertain. "Easy," she murmured, keeping her movements slow and deliberate. "Nobody's going to hurt you." She'd learned that voice from Wade, calm, steady, projecting confidence the animals could sense. The gelding's ears swiveled forward, listening. Emily laid the blanket across his back, and he flinched, but didn't bolt. Progress. Wade leaned against the stall door, watching. "You're getting good at this." "I have a good teacher." "You have good instincts. That's harder to teach," he paused. "I was thinking, come spring, we might expand the breeding program. There's demand for good working horses, especially with the railroad pushing west. We could build a real business if we're smart about it." Emily looked at him, surprised. "That's a big step." "It is. But I think we're ready. You know the stock, you understand the market. Cal's learning fast. With all of us working together." He trailed off, but Emily heard what he wasn't saying. "With all of us working together, we could build something that lasts." "I'd like that," she said quietly. They worked with the gelding for another hour, getting him comfortable with the saddle, letting him carry weight without a rider. By the time they finished, both Emily and Wade were cold despite the work, ready for the warmth of the house. As they walked back across the yard, a rider appeared on the road. Marshall Holloway, on a big roan horse, his face grim against the falling snow. Emily's stomach clenched instinctively, old fear rising despite knowing they were safe now. Wade raised a hand in greeting. "Marshall, didn't expect to see you in this weather." Holloway dismounted, accepting Wade's offer to stable his horse. "Wouldn't have come if it wasn't important. We need to talk." They settled in the main room, Holloway accepting coffee from Mrs. Lynn and thawing his hands by the fire. He looked tired, Emily thought, older than when they'd last seen him. "Briggs hanged 2 weeks ago," Holloway said without preamble. "Morton got 20 years hard labor. The judge was thorough in his sentencing." Emily felt nothing at the news. No satisfaction, no relief, just a kind of hollow acknowledgement that justice had been done. Beside her, Wade nodded slowly. "And the others?" "Most of the hired guns scattered. We caught a few, made examples. The rest won't show their faces in this territory again." Holloway set down his coffee cup. "But that's not why I'm here. We found some of the children from the ledgers." Emily's breath caught. "How many?" 11 so far, some in mining camps, some in domestic service, one in a logging operation up north. We've brought them back to Cedar Bluff, but," he hesitated, "most of them have no family left. No place to go. The territory's orphanage is overcrowded and underfunded. I was hoping you might have suggestions." Wade and Emily exchanged glances. She saw her own thought reflected in his eyes. 11 children, lost and alone, needing homes. "How old are they?" Wade asked. "Range from 7 to 15, mix of boys and girls. Some are in rough shape, malnourished, worked too hard, some bearing scars that won't ever fully heal." Holloway's voice was heavy. "They need families willing to take damaged kids and give them time to heal. That's asking a lot." "What about the townspeople?" Emily asked. "After what happened with Briggs, surely some of them would be willing." "Some are. Mrs. Patterson's already taken in 2 girls. Dutch Keller's family took a boy, but that still leaves 8 without homes." Holloway looked at Wade. "I know you've got your hands full already, but I thought if you knew anyone, any ranchers or farmers who might be willing." Wade was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee. Emily could see him calculating space in the house, resources, the enormous responsibility of taking on more children. Then he looked up. "We could take 2, he said. "Maybe 3 if they're willing to share rooms. The loft can be partitioned and we could add on to the house come spring." Holloway's expression lightened. "You're serious? We've got the land, the food, the work. What we're building here, it's big enough for more than just us." Wade looked at Emily. "If you're willing." Emily thought of the twins and Cal, how they'd blossomed with safety and stability, thought of her mother, who'd never turned away anyone who needed help, thought of what it would mean to give lost children the same chance they'd been given. "I'm willing," she said. "But they should have a choice. No one should be forced into a new family. They've had enough of being told what to do." "Agreed." Wade turned back to Holloway. "Bring them out. Let them see the ranch, meet us, decide for themselves if this is somewhere they could belong." Holloway stood, relief clear on his weathered face. "I'll bring them tomorrow if the snow lets up. And Hollis, thank you. The territory needs more people like you." "The territory needs more people willing to do the hard thing when it's necessary," Wade corrected. "We're just doing what's right." After Holloway left, Emily and Wade sat in silence, watching snow pile up against the windows. Mrs. Lynn emerged from the back room where she'd been supervising the twins' nap. "I hear everything," she said calmly. "We need more beds, more blankets, more food." She wasn't asking, she was planning. "We'll manage," Wade said. "Of course we manage. We always manage." Mrs. Lynn settled into her chair and picked up her knitting. "House too quiet anyway. More children make it feel right." Cal appeared from the barn, shaking snow from his coat. "Who was that riding away?" "Marshall Holloway," Wade said. "He's bringing some children out tomorrow. Kids who were rescued from the places Briggs sent them. They need homes." Cal's eyes widened. "Are we taking them in?" "If they want to stay. If they think they could be happy here." Wade studied the boy. What do you think? You'd be the oldest. Might mean extra responsibility. Cal straightened, clearly taking the question seriously. I think if we can help them, we should. Everyone deserves what we got. A safe place, people who care, a real home. He paused. Besides, it gets lonely sometimes. Might be nice to have more people around. Emily felt her throat tighten with pride. This boy who'd been so frightened just months ago was already thinking about others, about building community. Her mother would have loved him. That night, after the children were in bed, Emily found Wade on the porch again, his usual contemplation spot. Snow had stopped falling but lay thick on the ground, transforming the familiar landscape into something strange and beautiful. You're worried, she said, settling beside him. Thinking, Wade corrected, about what we're taking on. More children means more mouths to feed, more clothes to buy, more everything. And some of these kids, Holloway said they're damaged. That's a lot to handle. We're all damaged, Emily said quietly. Cal still has nightmares about Briggs's men. The twins won't sleep unless someone's in the room with them. I jump at shadows. You have ghosts you're still wrestling with. Damage doesn't make people less worthy of love. It just means they need more patience. Wade smiled faintly. When did you get so wise? About the time I realized that running from broken things just leaves you alone with your own broken pieces. She looked at him. We're building something good here, Wade. Something that matters. Bringing in more kids who need it, that's not a burden. That's the whole point. You sure about this? It's going to change everything. I'm sure. Are you? Wade was quiet for a long time, watching snow drift from the barn roof. Finally, he said, When my family died, I thought that was it. Thought my chance at having a family, at being a father, died with them. But maybe that's not how it works. Maybe family isn't just about blood. Maybe it's about choosing to care for people, to build something together even when it's hard. He looked at her. You and those kids, you've given me a reason to wake up in the morning, given me purpose beyond just existing. If we can do that for more children, give them the same chance, then yes, I'm sure. Emily reached out and took his hand, squeezed it once. They sat together in the cold and the quiet, two people who'd found each other in the worst of circumstances and built something worth protecting. The next day dawned clear and bright, the world glittering under fresh snow. Marshal Holloway arrived around noon with a wagon full of children, 8 of them, ranging from a small girl who looked barely 7 to a teenage boy with old eyes and scarred hands. They climbed down from the wagon slowly, uncertain, looking at the ranch like it might be another trap. Emily understood that wariness. She'd felt it herself not so long ago. She approached them carefully, keeping her movements unthreatening. I'm Emily. This is Wade. And that's Mrs. Lynn. Inside are my brother Cal and my sisters Lila and Maisie. She gestured to the house. We're not going to force you to do anything. You're here to see the place, meet us, decide if this is somewhere you could see yourself living. If it's not, that's fine. Marshal Holloway will find you somewhere else. No pressure. No tricks. One of the girls, maybe 12, with dark hair and suspicious eyes, spoke up. What do you want from us? Nothing, Emily said honestly. Well, that's not quite true. If you stay, you'll have chores. Everyone works here because running a ranch takes all of us. But you'll also have your own space, good food, warm beds, and people who'll look out for you. What we want is to give you a safe place to grow up. What you do with that is your choice. Wade stepped forward. Come inside, have something to eat. Look around, ask questions, then you can decide. They filed into the house slowly, these damaged children, their eyes taking in everything. The warm fire, the smell of bread baking, the cozy furniture and clean floors. Mrs. Lynn appeared with mugs of hot cider and plates of cookies, her presence calm and maternal without being overwhelming. Cal emerged from the barn and froze when he saw the crowd of new kids. Then he straightened his shoulders and walked over to the teenage boy with the scarred hands. I'm Cal. Want to see the barn? We've got some new foals. The boy hesitated, then nodded. They disappeared outside together, and Emily felt a surge of gratitude for her brother's instinctive kindness. The twins were less subtle. They ran up to the smallest girl and immediately started chattering about their room and their toys, and would she like to see their collection of pretty rocks. The girl looked overwhelmed but allowed herself to be led away, the twins' enthusiasm breaking through her careful reserve. Over the next few hours, the children explored the ranch. Some stuck close to adults, others wandered alone, all of them processing this strange new possibility. Emily watched them, saw the way they touched things carefully, as if afraid the warmth and safety might dissolve if they grabbed too hard. By late afternoon, they gathered back in the main room. Wade stood by the fire, his expression open, patient. "You've seen the place. You've met us. Now we need to talk honestly." He looked at each child in turn. "Life here isn't easy. We work hard. We look out for each other, and we don't tolerate cruelty or meanness. But we also don't tolerate anyone hurting you either. If you stay, you'll be safe. You'll have enough to eat. You'll go to school in town when weather permits. And you'll be part of a family. A strange, put-together family maybe, but a real one." The dark-haired girl who'd spoken earlier raised her hand. "What if we can't do the work? What if we're not strong enough?" "Then we teach you," Emily said. "Everyone starts somewhere. Cal couldn't saddle a horse when he got here. Now he's better at it than I am. You learn, you grow, you get stronger. We're patient." "What if we want to leave?" This from a thin boy about 10. "What if it doesn't work out?" "Then you leave," Wade said simply. "I'm not in the business of keeping people prisoner. If this doesn't feel right, we'll find you somewhere else. No hard feelings." The children looked at each other, some kind of silent communication passing between them. Finally, the teenage boy with scarred hands spoke up. "My name's Thomas. I'm 15. I was in a mining camp for 2 years. His voice was rough, unused to speaking. "I don't know how to be normal anymore. Don't know how to be around people without waiting for them to hurt me. But I'd like to try. If you'll have me." "We'll have you," Wade said immediately. "And you don't need to be normal. You just need to be yourself." One by one, the others spoke up. The dark-haired girl was Sarah, 13, who'd been sold into domestic service and still had nightmares about the woman who'd beaten her for minor infractions. The small girl the twins had claimed was Anna, 7, who'd been working in a laundry since she was 5. 5 others, each with their own story of loss and survival, each choosing to take a chance on this strange offer of home. Only one boy decided it wasn't for him, a 12-year-old named Peter who wanted to find his uncle in Denver. Holloway promised to help with that, and no one tried to change Peter's mind. Choice mattered. As evening fell, they made arrangements. Thomas would share the barn loft with Cal, helping partition it into 2 spaces. Sarah and 2 other girls would take the room being added onto the house, sleeping in the main room temporarily. The younger boys would bunk together in another addition. It would be cramped until spring when they could build proper rooms, but they'd manage. Mrs. Lynn took charge of sorting out clothes and blankets, her voice steady as she directed traffic. Emily helped the girls settle in, answered their nervous questions, showed them where everything was. Wade worked with the boys, explaining chores and routines, making it clear what was expected but also what support they'd have. By the time everyone was settled, the house was full of noise and bodies and energy, so different from the quiet emptiness it had been just months ago. Emily stood in the kitchen doorway, watching children sprawl around the fire, listening to their tentative conversations and occasional laughter, and felt something shift in her chest. This was what her mother had meant about making life mean something. This was what Wade had been searching for when he found them in that barn. This was family, not perfect, not easy, but real and worth fighting for. Late that night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Emily found Wade checking on the stock one last time. The barn was warm from the animals' body heat, sweet with the smell of hay and horses. "Quite a day," she said. Wade laughed quietly. "That's an understatement. We went from 5 to 13 people in one afternoon." "Having second thoughts?" "Not even first thoughts at this point. We're committed now." He leaned against a stall door, watching a mare nuzzle her foal. "But I think it's going to be all right. These kids, they're survivors. They know how to work hard, how to adapt. With time and patience, they'll heal." "So will you," Emily said softly. Wade looked at her, surprise flickering across his face. "What do you mean?" "I mean you've spent 8 years punishing yourself for something that wasn't your fault, hiding from life because living hurt too much. But look around, Wade. Look at what you've built. These children have a future because you chose to care when you could have chosen to stay empty. She moved closer. You saved my family. Now you're saving more. That's not replacing the family you lost. That's honoring them by making sure their death meant something other than your own destruction. Wade's eyes were suspiciously bright. He cleared his throat roughly. Your mother raised you well. She did. And she'd tell you the same thing I am. Grief is a teacher, not a jailer. Learn from it and let it make you kinder, not harder. Wade pulled her into a one-armed hug, the embrace brief but genuine. Thank you, Emily, for everything. We're partners, remember? That means we look out for each other. They walked back to the house together, through snow that crunched under their boots, beneath stars so bright they hurt to look at. Inside, the house glowed with lamplight, warm and welcoming. Through the windows, Emily could see Mrs. Lynn moving about the kitchen, preparing for tomorrow's breakfast. Could hear the faint sound of voices as Cal and Thomas talked in the loft. This was home now. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and solid and worth everything they'd risked to build it. The winter passed in a blur of adjustment and growth. The new children settled in gradually, learning the rhythms of ranch life, growing stronger on good food and hard work. There were hard days, nightmares that woke the whole house, panic attacks triggered by unexpected sounds, moments when old fears surfaced and threatened to drown fragile progress. But there were good days, too. Days when laughter rang through the house, when children played in the snow without looking over their shoulders, when small victories, a shy smile, a shared joke, a reached-out hand, reminded them all why they were doing this. Spring came slowly, snow giving way to mud and then to green grass. They broke ground on the house additions, everyone pitching in to haul timber and mix mortar. Thomas turned out to have a gift for carpentry, his scarred hands steady and precise as he measured and cut. Sarah discovered she loved working with the horses, her gentle patience perfect for training young stock. Anna attached herself to Mrs. Lynn and learned to cook, her small face fierce with concentration as she kneaded bread. By summer, the house had grown to accommodate everyone comfortably. They'd added 2 wings, each with multiple bedrooms, and enclosed a back porch for extra workspace. The ranch was thriving too. The spring foaling had gone well, producing 6 healthy colts they'd be able to sell in a year. Word was spreading about the quality of their stock, bringing buyers from as far as Denver. One evening in late August, as the sun set in shades of gold and pink, they all gathered on the expanded porch for dinner. 13 people crowded around a table Wade and Thomas had built together, passing plates and bowls, talking over each other, arguing good-naturedly about whose turn it was to wash dishes. Emily sat back and watched them, her family, chosen and built from broken pieces and desperate hope. Cal was explaining horse breeding to the younger boys, his voice confident and clear. The twins were giggling with Anna about some secret joke. Sarah was helping Mrs. Lynn serve, moving with the ease of someone who belonged. Thomas sat beside Wade, the two of them discussing plans for a new barn, their heads bent together like father and son. Wade caught her eye across the table and smiled, and in that smile Emily saw everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, everything they still had to do. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There would be more hard days ahead, more challenges to face, more broken things to mend, but they'd face them together, this strange assembled family bound by choice and courage, and the stubborn refusal to let darkness win. After dinner, as the children scattered to evening chores and games, Wade pulled Emily aside. "I've been thinking," he said, "about making things official." Emily's eyebrows rose. "Official how?" "Legal adoption, for all of them. Make them legally our children. Give them the protection and rights that come with that." He paused. "I know it's a big step, but I think it's the right one." Emily thought about what that would mean. Permanent family, unbreakable bonds, a future guaranteed not by promises but by law. The children should decide, each one individually. No pressure. Agreed. They brought it up at breakfast the next morning, Wade explaining carefully what adoption would mean, what rights it would give them, what it would change, and what would stay the same. The children listened in silence. Cal spoke first. "Would we take your name? Become Hollises instead of Mercers?" "If you wanted to," Wade said. "Or you could keep your own name. That's up to you." "I'd like to be a Hollis," Cal said quietly, "if that's all right." The twins nodded enthusiastically, already won over. One by one, the others agreed. Thomas, Sarah, Anna, all of them choosing to bind themselves permanently to this family they'd found. The legal process took months, requiring trips to town, meetings with judges, endless paperwork. But by the first snow of the second winter, it was done. They were legally, permanently, irrevocably a family. Emily stood in the yard one December morning watching children play in the snow. 2 years had passed since she'd held that rifle in a collapsing barn, terrified and desperate. 2 years since Wade had offered her a choice and a chance. Looking at everything they'd built, the thriving ranch, the expanded house, the children who laughed instead of flinched, she could barely recognize her own life. Wade joined her, his breath clouding in the cold air. His shoulder didn't bother him much anymore, just a dull ache when storms were coming. The gray in his hair had spread, but his eyes were alive in a way they hadn't been when they'd first met. "No regrets?" he asked. Emily thought about everything they'd been through, the fear and violence, the hard work and harder days, the moments of doubt and despair. Thought about Cal teaching the younger boys to ride, about Sarah's quiet joy when working with the horses, about the twins who no longer had nightmares every night. Thought about Mrs. Lynn humming as she cooked, about Thomas building furniture with increasing skill, about this impossible family that shouldn't work but somehow did. "Not one," she said. "You?" "Not one." They stood together in the cold watching their children play and felt the weight of what they'd accomplished settle around them like a warm cloak. They'd taken broken pieces, broken people, broken lives, broken hearts, and built something whole. Not perfect, never perfect, but real and lasting and full of hope. The ranch would continue to grow. More children would come. More lives would be changed. There would be challenges ahead, illness and injury, heartbreak and loss, all the ordinary tragedies that came with living. But they'd face them together, this family bound not by blood but by choice, by courage, by the stubborn belief that love was stronger than fear and that home was something you built, not something you were born into. As snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, Emily thought of her mother.